Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thank you, sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggin the Scott Auctions, Tops, Upper Deck, and Panini. Jeremy Lee, you heard my episode about his hobby spectrum assessment, and he wanted to amplify that. And I thought that's great. I had talked with him when it was in the ideation stage and thought it was great. So I've now experienced it. And so we unpack it further. There's a wait list. Hopefully we can get through that. But I encourage you to sign up. The Hobby Spectrum. You are the founder. And I take great pride in founding some things. But as you're finding out, you put it out there, it can take on a life of its own. A very positive experience with it. I am a hybrid right now and probably for the rest of my life.
It all started with myself asking a question. We have collectors on one end and investors on the other end, and everyone falls somewhere in between. And I thought, could I bring that idea out of the abstract and into a framework? What would you ask somebody if you wanted to figure out where they fell on that spectrum? And it ended up becoming this 50-question diagnostic assessment. And I was in your ear from early on. What do you think of this? And you thought it was a great idea. Originally, you said, just get it out there. It took me longer than I had intended because I wanted to do it in a way that I was proud of. We've achieved that now. You can put an assessment out there, people can take it, and then that's the end of the story. And I didn't want that to be the end of the story. I wanted it to be a community builder, but not to build a community platform so much like we have in social media. So that led to the idea of this directory feature where you can see other collectors and how they responded and were diagnosed by the assessment into one of the 7 archetypes. There aren't only 7 archetypes that hobbyists fall in. We all dip our toes into more than one archetype, I would think. We have what's maybe the core archetype, and that's what the assessment is trying to figure out.
Jeremy, there's more than 100.
I think there's a million, Jim.
I'm saying it's every different way you could answer the 50 questions. And you're going to evolve the questions a little bit, right? Because saying it took you a long time. I think it was a fast track. You got from ideation to execution of more than a minimum viable product. You got something workable right from the start. And I know you had help, but it's more than a great start. You're off and running.
Thank you. I like to say there's an infinite amount of ways to approach the hobby, much more than 7. So the intention is to add modifications, additional question sets that would modify your collector identity within the hobby spectrum's framework. So not necessarily going to pull you out of your core archetype, but just augment it a little bit. We've already got 8 or 9 of these additional subspectrums or layered on spectrums that we will roll out over time, including a maturity progression so that you can mature throughout the archetype, because it's not about lateral movement along the spectrum, although it can be aspirational that way. But in the absence of this being something where a higher score is better or a lower score is better, because that's not the concept here. It is about being proud of who you are in the hobby. Perhaps if you want to evolve, you can evolve within it, or you can evolve laterally along it if you see an approach that maybe you would find more enjoyable for your own hobby experience. So we're going to be adding these additional question sets that will further detail and customize each of our approaches to this hobby. That's how the identity discovery will evolve. Discovering like-minded, similar collectors. We're already seeing people go onto the Spectrum directory, scroll through it, sort or filter by their own archetype, and then reach out to all the people through the links that are embedded in these directory profiles. As I call them tiles, because they look like a tile as you scroll through. You can click on the number you scored, and it'll filter out to just the people that scored the same number as you. Now you can reach out to them and say, hey, we're the same score on the hobby spectrum. Just develop relationships. So we are helping facilitate connectivity, community, relationships, which I know from my personal experience has greatly enhanced my life, not just my hobby, by having made so many great friends and connections and relationships in the hobby. Then there's the be discovered aspect of it by putting yourself out on the directory, because we enable you to put all your social links, your hobby links, and some wildcards for your own website, your newsletter, your blog, anything you really want. The other one, Jim, I think is really cool. And a lot of your previous and future podcast guests might see utility in this. Not everybody has a hobby content platform like you and I do. So if you've been a guest on Sports Card Insights or Sports Cards Live or with John Newman or with anybody out there, if you've been a guest with anybody, you could add a link to that video or that podcast to your directory so that that you can now be discovered. Somebody might say, oh, there's a purist or there's a nostalgic or whatever archetype you're in, and go learn about them. It's a way for you to put yourself out there without having to have your own content network as well. And then we have additional features coming in terms of how to let people know what you collect and how you collect. We're going to be adding sports you collect, teams you collect, and players you collect. Any athlete who's ever had a card, you'll be able to add to your profile. Now, we haven't figured out what it's going to look like yet, but that's coming hopefully by the end of the month here when we roll out of this sort of trial or beta period and really go public with it.
Jeremy, at your heart, you've been a connector within the industry. You're not just a content creator, you're almost a content connector. You bring in guests that are at the top of their game in many cases. But the linearity of going from being a pure collector to being like a pure investor, that resonates with a lot of people. I'm wondering if a second dimension orthogonal to that might be the intensity, because there's some people that think they're tycoons and their best card is $500. Now they could still be a tycoon, but that's different than somebody picking up six-figure cards and up. And a collector that isn't trying to get all the sets, but just wants to get their childhood set or something like that. So the intensity is something. So I've found myself realizing I've probably been a hybrid on average for most of the time, but my intensity has been higher or lower. And that's also been proportional to the amount of time I spent with the cards and the dollar values I was dealing with. I think a lot of these people, they're going to love calling themselves a tycoon, but their whole collection might be worth $1,000. I had to answer your questions being that mainly I'm in the dollar box. And I've got to take it in that context. And I just am amazed that when I got done, some of the questions, you couldn't leave it as not applicable or none of the above. I thought, this is the closest over my life of the way I've looked at things. And it has been a hybrid. You've got great technical help on that. I used to teach sampling and statistics. I was a professor, but I never really taught survey design. And survey design is at least as much art as it is science. And you did well.
Thank you. It's not a perfect survey at this point. There are some gaps. I've had lots of feedback from these early adopters, and I'm grateful for that. So we're going to work through that to try and have it accommodate as many people as possible. So there is an answer for everybody. You mentioned the intensity factor. I think that's a great call out. And in one way, the maturity progression layer we're going to add on might address that, because as you get more experience and you have more transactions and time under your belt, you can level up. But maybe there's an opportunity to add an intensity modifier, a small question set that would help indicate where you are on the intensity scale within your archetype.
I'm also very much in favor of going back somewhat, not just to the eye appeal of grading, but the words of grading. If you tell me you've got a very good card or excellent, I have something in my mind. But if you say it's a 4 or a 3, that means something different. And so putting words on something rather than being a 46 hybrid, I'm just a hybrid. There may be hybrids that are higher or lower, but I'm a hybrid that captures most of it.
We're looking to continually refine it and make it more useful and more revealing, insightful for everybody.
Who is the we? You have a development team and you have advisors. So what is it?
I have a strategic advisor, somebody who started out being similar to you. You've been a mentor to me over the past almost 6 years now since I started. And I've been grateful for that from the beginning. I brought on a gentleman named Chris Trout, who started out as a bit of a life coach, you could say. And he has some great experiences in the business world, just a real thoughtful guy. So he's on as a strategic advisor with me. And of course, the development team at Infernal Red Technologies, specifically Ed Snyder, who's the lead developer on the project and works on other projects within the hobby with the founder, Scott Locke, and their whole team over there. What I'm doing as well, I'm not going to mention names yet, but I've recruited one person to become like an advisor as we continue to build these things out, because I'm only one mind and I can't contemplate everything. And I'm currently trying to figure out how to build this advisory board, if you will, low time commitment, all these things, but just people that I can bounce ideas off of so that I'm not the only one making these calls. And I need to be held accountable for not being too tunnel vision with things. I've got one person so far whose thoughts and experiences, the way they do things, I greatly respect. I'm thinking maybe There's one person from each archetype that joins to help me understand how those people think better. I want to provide a really insightful tool that's going to help people enjoy the hobby more. Jim, I feel like we love our cards, but I think to a degree, relationships help keep people in the hobby too. And I want to help facilitate more of those. You called me a content connector. That's a huge compliment. Yeah, I love connecting people. I've been hosting networking events at the Sport Card Expo for years. I get a lot of joy from that.
That'd be a big reason I'd want to get back up to Toronto, because I think I'd like to participate in that. And I'm working on it. We'll see.
That's really what I'm trying to do with this thing. But the nice thing, Jim, you were there from the inception of the idea. I reached out to you pretty early to get your thoughts on it. And it's come a long way from there. I remember you said, just get the survey out there. And I wanted to be first to market. I thought, this is a fun idea. This is a good idea. I could see other people working on something. But what happened was I had a lot of the bones ready to go. I went to the National and I ended up chatting with a couple of friends of mine who have their own hobby content platforms, businesses. Josh from the Hockey Cards Gong Show has built hockeychecklist.com, and Mark from My Card Post has built his subscription-based selling platform. And I said, who built your sites for you? They're so great. They told me, and I said, that's not really the route I want to go. I ran into Tim Getch from ComC. I said, Tim, do you want to build this for me? Knowing he wouldn't, he's a busy guy. He said, I'll send you an email to introduce you to the guys from Inferno Red Technology. And I hadn't put two and two together yet, but I had actually met them a couple years earlier at the Beckett Industry Summit in Las Vegas. They knew who I was and they were familiar with my content. So I had a call with them mid-August after the National, and they accepted the project. From there, I sent them all the documentation, which then allowed me to double down on my book, Pops and Comps. The Spectrum was off my plate for a couple months. They delivered me at the end of November what the website would look like. We refined it. And then December 10th or 11th, we started inviting people to come take the survey, add themselves to the directory. And the response has been great. And the feedback I'm getting is almost exclusively, it nailed me. And the lengthy description you get at the end, people are telling me, it's like you could see right into me, they've been telling me. One person said it's about 80% accurate. I thought, that's good. There's only 7 of them. They're not going to apply to everybody in their entirety. So 80% accuracy or 80% applicability, very successful, I believe. But I'm also asking people what didn't apply. I'd like to make sure that we can make this as appropriate as possible for people. So we have some bigger ideas moving forward as well.
You acted like maybe this was a race to get this out. I don't think other people were considering this as you were, in the sense there's no really clear, obvious path to big monetization of this. And so when that happens, the first mover advantage is a big deal. And you are the first mover. So you will be the de facto standard. I don't even know there'll be imitators if you can keep iterating and keep improving. Again, I don't think there's a path to huge monetization, but there probably are some monetization opportunities there. In fact, there are, but they're not obvious. They're not low-hanging fruit. You could have some sponsors. You could charge some subscriptions, but this is a contribution to the hobby, which is the way I love for things to start out. If it gets so big that you've got to hire a bunch of employees to manage this thing, then that's a different financial calculus. But hats off to you for getting it out there on your own dime. Like I said, it's a contribution to the health of the hobby. It's not like we're going to have a civil war between the investors and the collectors, but you've given them some common language.
I want them to understand each other a little bit better, a shared language for what's a fragmented and divisive hobby at times. As I tell the story, because I think it really just emphasizes my motivation. When I first met with you and told you about it, you said to me, how much are you going to charge for this? I never even thought about that. I was taken aback by the question. It's going to be free. What do you mean? How much am I going to charge for it? And I think you were delighted by that answer. Yeah, I'm not leading with monetization in mind. I want to leave the contribution behind myself at the end of the day. However, I'm also aware this is an investment and it is likely going to be of some value. So the monetization angle is in the back of my mind. I don't want to hide that, but I'm truly leading with how do we make this better for hobbyists? If this thing catches on, maybe it can become somewhat foundational. And that would be the greatest thing I could ever contribute to our hobby and to the industry.
The hobby hates companies or individuals that do the quote unquote cash grab. That is the opposite of what you're doing. If there is some cash light at the end of the tunnel, like for me, I did a price survey for free, totally my own expense, for 1976, 1977, 1978. So then when I came out with a book that was for sale in 79, it was well received. I paid my dues. Was that a cash grab? I don't think so. Most cash grabs don't take 3 years, and your thing might take 3 years. But at some point, if a lot of people do this and they get value from it, you can't sell something that has no value.
I'm really excited by the whole thing and I plan to continue building it out and improving it. And we've set it now where you can retake the assessment every 30 days because I think the assessment itself will evolve, but I know that collectors also evolve and your account will track your historical evolution as well. I want to facilitate relationships, whether they are business relationships or not, really the non-business relationships. But I can see this being a way to find people who might have a card you're looking for, or so if you're working on a 1953 Topps baseball set, you might be able to find a collector who is moving out of theirs for whatever reason. And you might know this person's a purist. They're probably not going to sell their cards, but if they're further to the right on the spectrum, they may be more willing to sell or trade cards away. You might have a bit of a profile on the person and you can save yourself time and energy before reaching out. But that's down the line as the different ways relationships do flourish in the hobby can be facilitated on the site.
I know you're not doing it for the money, but it is very hard to compete with free. Like I said, I started out free, was free for 3 years. If you're free for a while, nobody's going to want to jump in and try to outdo you in the freeness of it.
I want to keep it free for people. And if there's a way to monetize down the road to cover expenses, earn back investment, which is backwards, but that would be great at the end of the day. So we'll see. When I started Sports Cards Live, I went in with planning 1 week ahead. And I'm doing the same thing with this. I'm really just thinking 8 weeks ahead of time. I'm not looking out too far because I just know how these things can change and different use cases will present themselves. So really open-minded about the direction it's going to go.
Open-walleted. You put your money where your mouth was. You had an idea and you made it happen at your expense. And I certainly don't begrudge you eventually at some point getting all or more back.
I just wanted to invite all your listeners to join. I've had some people tell me they heard about it from the Dr. Jim podcast. So yeah, I want people to come join it. The wait list will be over hopefully by February 1st. Yeah.
Easy to get customers when it's free. And it's a good thing. It's not a waste of time. Right. It's more accurate than I thought it was going to be. It took less time, and I see great potential for the future.
You made a few comments on your podcast when you were talking about it, about how you felt like it was talking about maybe higher end cards a lot more. And I raised an eyebrow because that wasn't the intention. The questions are meant to really capture any level of collecting.
Like consolidation. Consolidation never entered into anything 50 years ago when I was at my peak.
What about when you're a recess, Jim, and your trade? I'll give you 4 cards for your Mickey Mantle. That was consolidation.
If you go back to those days, bragging rights were how many cards you had and how many good cards you had too. But it's become how few cards you have. The other question would be, what's the weight of your collection? How many cards do you have? Does it fit in a Zion case, or is it in a bunch of monster boxes, or is it in a warehouse? It's different intensity, but mostly this was about working towards some grail cards. I think that's what the modern hobby is now. And I'm not in step with that. That's why I don't really bid on auctions. Almost everything I buy is $1. But my point is I could still answer the questionnaire in a way that I'm trying to get the best dollar cards. And I want an emotional connection as well as a value connection. So again, I was pleasantly surprised and very pleased. I could fill it out and feel like I could answer every question in a way that had integrity and honesty, but not a perfect fit for the question.
Now I just have to convince you to add yourself to the directory and add a link to your podcast.
I don't know that I want to be out there. I'm a hybrid. What are they going to say? You're not a hybrid. Or if you have critics, they'll criticize anything. But if people think I'm a tycoon, then that's not accurate. I don't think I ever was a tycoon. I might have been an operator when I was at my peak buying. Again, I was not buying individual cards. I was buying collections. In fact, that's a tip from being more of a purist. As soon as I started buying collection and had lots of dupes, then it doesn't make sense to be a purist and on the low end. You have to transact some of the other stuff. Yeah.
You're a hybrid dominant and you might have a secondary dipping your toes in operator. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't control what anyone's going to say. You certainly know that. By not being on the directory, you are keeping your content away from certain people. I'm sure you have a great following, but hopefully this will become big enough where a lot of people could discover your legacy through your podcast, through the directory.